Well, welcome into Bayou Roar. On this episode, I'm going to be recapping LSU's game against Louisiana Tech, as well as sharing my thoughts on everything that happened in week two of college football. But of course, we have to start with LSU's 23-7 win over the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs on Saturday night. And look, let's just be completely transparent. This was just a really sloppy game for LSU. And I won't lie, if I was recording this immediately after that game happened, I would have been a lot harsher on LSU than I'm going to be on this one. But after some time to kind of process everything, listen to a couple different people's thoughts on it, and kind of again just think about everything a little bit more thoroughly, I've come to the conclusion that while yes, it was not a great game on Saturday night for LSU, it was also one of those games that you look back and say, okay, at least it was not one of those games that other teams on Saturday had, like Clemson, who struggled a ton with Troy, was even losing to Troy for a big part of that ball game until they were able to come back and win it. And then obviously Florida, I mean, they went into their game with a 17.5 point favorite on their side. And what happened there? They ended up losing the ball game. So yes, even though it was not the best ball game in the world for LSU, at least I can sit here today and say, at least I didn't find myself in a position where we were struggling, we were losing, and we ended up having to just squeak one out, or the complete opposite and going, okay, well, we completely dropped the ball and we ended up losing on Saturday night. I mean, at least those two things did not really happen. And even in a really ugly game, mostly offensively, you were able to piece things together and pull out a win on Saturday night. And look, I know as LSU fans, we don't really want that to kind of be the standard. We just don't. But I mean, coming off such a huge game for, this one is it's understandable why you're not so hyped. I mean, you're leaving Clemson with a big time win, your first week one win in the Brian Kelly era, first week one win since even before Brian Kelly got to LSU. I mean, it's been 5 years, and now, you get this huge win on the road. You are definitely feeling it. And let's be honest, you probably were just carrying that all week. The excitement, the energy, all of those things, celebrating the win all week. And then now you have to try to go play Louisiana Tech, who's not a great ball club on Saturday night in Death Valley. And let's be honest, in front of a crowd that probably, it was sold out and there was a ton of people there, but just probably weren't expecting much of anything and weren't going to provide the same energy as like what you're going to get against Florida this upcoming Saturday. It's just a different atmosphere when you're playing a non-conference opponent like La Tech versus a bigger SEC opponent. There just is. There's just a different feeling in the stadium when that happens. And so for LSU, I can understand why going into this one, maybe you weren't, playing up to the same energy as you were the week before, but still, oh boy, this one was tough to get through. And so I'll share some of my thoughts from the first and second half and my overall thoughts on the game. But man, I mean, the overwhelming theme I think you're going to see here is just that this one was brutal. And it was from the very first snap, honestly, how brutal this was. Because the first play of the first half, Braylon Moore, your starting center, goes down with an ankle injury. And immediately when I saw him on the ground in pain, being helped off, and then him walking into the locker room, I was like, oh no, this is not good at all. Because obviously, we know that having a great center is a big key to having a really good offensive line, but then B, just to making your offense run really well as a whole. Because we saw last year with DJ Chester that, man, when you have a bad center, when you do not have somebody snapping the ball or being able to organize everybody that's really good at that, I mean, it is just a huge problem, more than you would probably think. But man, especially in this one, you could tell once DJ Chester came in, the huge drop off that there just is from Braylon to DJ. I mean, there's just a huge gap there. And luckily, Braylon Moore's injury is not season ending. And technically, he's questionable from reports that we have for the game against Florida. But from some other sources that I've seen, it feels like he's probably going to be more likely doubtful for the game against Florida. And honestly, if he doesn't play against Florida, then what I would do is just rest him against Southeast Louisiana and make sure that he's ready to go for the game against Ole Miss. Because let's be completely transparent. I think for one game against a big time opponent like Florida, I think you can survive making a game plan around DJ Chester. I do. I know I just mentioned that there is a huge drop off from Braylon Moore's play to DJ Chester, and that certainly is the case. But I think when you have time to make a game plan, like they weren't expecting Braylon Moore to go out on the first play. They just weren't. I mean, they did not expect that at all. But when you have a whole week to sit down and say, okay, we know DJ is going to be the starting center for this week, and we know that these are going to be the other pieces on the offensive line. Let's make a game plan where DJ's not put in really bad situations where we can kind of maybe highlight there's got to be some strengths that DJ Chester has. We can highlight some of those while also kind of hiding some of his weaknesses, and we can just, you know, play that Florida game, hopefully, pull out the win, obviously, and then get to Southeast Louisiana where obviously Chester can play, and that's not a huge deal. And then by the time we go on the road to Ole Miss, which will be a very tough game, we'll have Braylon back and fully ready to go for that one. That's kind of more the timeline that I'm hoping for, and that what will happen. Because again, it's just in my mind much easier to game plan for a singular game against Florida with Chester rather than saying, well, let's just roll the dice and see if we can get Braylon Moore in. And then, I mean, forbid he got hurt even more in that one, and then he's out for multiple months in multiple games. Well, then you're going to be in a lot more trouble. So I really am hoping that they'll just be smart. And unless Braylon Moore is fully ready to go for Saturday, I hope that they'll just make a game plan for Chester and just be in the mode of preparing him, Braylon Moore, that is, for Ole Miss rather than Florida. But we can talk about that obviously when we preview Florida, later this week. But for now, that is the good sign of hope though with the Braylon Moore injury is that it's not going to be season ending. And that is the biggest bright spot because he's really only going to miss maybe one or two games rather than the whole season. But it did mess up the offensive rhythm for the first, especially the first possession at least, because man, you could tell without Braylon, they were kind of trying to figure out everything. And then Nussmeier got a pick. And look, it was one of those interceptions that when you first look at it, you're like, man, the ball popped up. That's not on Nuss. But then you realize Nuss made a big mistake by not putting more of an umph underneath the throw. If he puts a little bit more sauce on that throw, Barry Brown is wide open. I mean, he is waltzing into the end zone. And look, even with the underthrow, Barry Brown is still wide open. I mean, it's not like Nuss threw it into this super tight window like we've seen in the past, where it's like Nuss, you really shouldn't have made that throw. No, I mean he had Barry Brown wide open. And look, looking for the opportunities for the deep pass was something that I was looking forward to us doing in this game against Louisiana Tech. But then it was like on the first play we try to do it and okay, it gets picked off. All right, got a little too I put a little too cute, but now looking back it's like okay, well, that was just Nuss's fault for throwing it too short. Because if again he puts that thing on the money, it's a touchdown. And just imagine the energy, even with losing Braylon Moore on the first play for the rest of the game, how much momentum you would have gotten back if Barry and Brown does walk that thing in for a touchdown to start rather than throwing that pick. I mean, that could have turned around this whole first half for LSU, but instead, Louisiana Tech gets the ball. And the good thing is you get a 3-and-out from your defense. I mean, this defense, I can go ahead and say this all night long, played like one of the best defenses in the country. And again, proving that they are just one monster unit. I mean, from top to bottom, they had a really great night. I mean, they just played lights out, and it started from the beginning, which was great because I think the other dominating storyline from this whole game was just how how much this offense struggled. And look, there were some things that I did note that I thought were good. Like the O-line still looked really solid in pass protection for most of the night. There were some instances in the second half where they were not so great. But for the most part, throughout the first half at least, I did notice, okay, Nuss got some time to throw the ball. It's just, man, it just felt like it was a struggle to really get anything going for a while. And you did suffer some injuries. Weston Davis also went down at one point with an injury, which wasn't great, and all these things. But your first two offensive possessions ended with a turnover and no points at all. You missed a field goal and you had no points after two offensive drives. And that cannot happen against Louisiana Tech. You should at least be able to go and put up a field goal, especially early on. I mean, you just should be able to do that, you would think. But no, they just weren't able to do it. And then finally, after the defense again just proved how awesome they are, they were finally able to kind of get some stuff going. And guess who was one of the first ones to make a big play happen? My boy Xavion Thomas. Xavion was a guy that I did highlight at the beginning of the year as a potentially underrated slash sleeper type of player for this year because everybody has focused so much on the other wideouts. Chris Hilton, even Kyle Parker, I feel like got talked about more, but definitely Aaron Anderson, Nick Anderson, Barry and Brown. I mean, there was just so many people talking about the other weapons out on the field for LSU. Even Trades Green and Bauer Sharp are getting hyped up a ton, but really no love for Xavion Thomas, who was a really good transfer coming in from Mississippi State a year ago. And so I said at the beginning of the year, man, if Xavion can really find a role in this offense, he could be really good. And they're finding ways to get him involved, whether that's handing the ball off to him or having him, run routes and catch the ball. I mean, he's doing a lot of different things and he's being really, really effective at it so far. And so I've really enjoyed that, having him be able to make some plays. And it's really nice to see him stepping up and finding a role in this offense because I do think he was one of those underutilized players from last year. And again, I felt like, man, if he can kind of slip under the radar from teams while they're focusing on all the other weapons that are out there, Xavion can end up with some really great performances. And that's held up to be true throughout the first 2 weeks. And then Nick Anderson ends up getting a touchdown later, which was great because Nick Anderson was really quiet against Clemson. I honestly saw him a couple of times, but I wasn't even sure how often he was out there against Clemson. But he got a touchdown in this one, a couple other catches. So that was really great to see. And just, I mean, again, I kept writing down that the defense just is carrying you so much. But the other thing that was really concerning in the first half that I started to notice was that we were reverting back to an offense that just didn't seem to know how to establish much of anything. I mean, the passing game was getting going a little bit, and there was some drops for sure that were not helpful. I mean, Nuss threw a couple of strikes to people that were dropped. That just, man, it was like, man, if you can just hang on to that, that would have been a big play. But the running game was pedestrian. I mean, the running game was awful in this one. Outside of a couple big runs from Harlem Berry and Xavion Thomas, you really had nobody run the ball especially well. And here's the other thing that I wrote down as well. As much as I like that Xavion Thomas wrinkle, where they'll move him into the backfield and give him a handoff, he also, on one of those carries, ended up fumbling it. And luckily, it rolled out of bounds and you didn't give them another free turnover. But that's the one risk with that wrinkle, as cool as it is. I mean, just eventually, man, you know, he's not a running back, he's a receiver. And as much as, like, yeah, he's got to have good hands, it's not like he's a natural ball carrier. So eventually, like, those things are going to happen if you just keep going back to it. Plus, we saw against Clemson, yeah, Xavion's got some speed, so he's going to sting you a couple of times on those plays. But if you keep going back to that well over and over and over again, eventually a team's going to shut that down, especially a really good defensive team. I mean, eventually they're going to stop that. That wrinkle's not going to exist beyond maybe one or two plays where it's really effective. So as much as I do like that Xavier addition to the offense, you gotta cool off with it a little bit at some point. You gotta chill out at some point and let your actual running backs get the ball because I mean, again, luckily that fumble rolled out of bounds, but I mean, if it hadn't and they had gotten the ball back, they would have been, I mean, going after Joe Sloan about that play call, just continuing to go back to it over and over again. So again, I do think that there are some really cool parts of this offense that I like, but it just seems like Joe Sloan really reverted from a week ago where he had a great game plan against Clemson to almost looking like he didn't have a plan at all against Louisiana Tech, and he was just throwing darts at the wall, going, well, let's try this and let's see if this works." And it's like, dude, come on, like we've got to have a better game plan than this. I know you probably looked at Louisiana Tech and said, "Man, it's Louisiana Tech." But no, you got to approach this game the same way you would even a Clemson. Like you got to have a solid offensive identity that's going to not just show up, you know, in week two, but for the weeks following this. You want a game plan that's going to follow you from week one to week two to week three and so on and so forth. You don't want to just be coming up with something new every single week. I mean, you have to have an identity on offense. And I just don't really know what ours is after looking, especially at the first half in this one. And look, we squandered an opportunity to get a touchdown because I felt like some of the play calls that we had didn't really just work. And it was like, dude, come on, man. We're having to settle for a field goal now to end the half. And it's just, I just didn't like it. It felt like the offense was just asleep half the time. And it's like, thank goodness that this defense is really good this year. Because without them, you could have been in a much bigger mess than you ended up being in. And I remember I really did think going into halftime, I was like, well, man, maybe they'll fix something at halftime and come out and be better. And it was like, nah, that was not the case. Defensively, they were still great, even on a kind of a rough first possession defensively, where you had a couple flags that extended Louisiana Tech's drive and all that. You still ended up doing really well defensively to get them off the field eventually. But again, just no running game. No running game at all. I mean, not Harlem Berry, Caden Durham ended up with, I mean, just really poor numbers on the night. Really, really poor numbers on the night for him. And honestly, this was a stat line that, like, against a really good defense like Clemson, I almost would have said, okay, yeah, I could have seen that happening against that defensive line against Clemson and all that. But 13 carries for 29 yards and a touchdown in this one, Caden Durham should not be getting that. And look, I mean, the box score is going to look nice when like Harlem Berry's getting 6 carries for 56 yards and Xavion's got 6 for 54. But then you look at their longs, it's like Harlem Berry had a long run of 43 yards, which really saved the night for LSU's rushing stats. And then Xavion had a long of 48 yards, it says on here. So, I mean, just those runs alone really saved, again, the day when it came to LSU's rushing numbers. But it was not a great day running the football for LSU, and it just seemed like they could not establish that whatsoever. And it was just extremely frustrating to see us go back to that again. And it's just one of those things you've got to fix and you have got to get right because you cannot just walk into every single week not knowing if the running game is going to be there or not. That's just something that cannot happen. And look, they still were coming up with some nice plays every now and again. There were a couple of plays that I like. I called flip plays to Barry and Brown where they put him in motion and they just kind of flip the ball forward to him or flip it behind him to him. And it was those plays were effective and they worked really well. And I liked those plays because Barry and Brown's got a ton of speed. And those are little things that you can add into this offense to make it a little bit more unpredictable. I mean, and something where you're not just going to be lining up Xavier Thomas in the backfield all the time to where eventually they're going to go, oh, he's going to get the handoff. Let's just stop it. It's like, okay, well, now Berrien's in motion. What is he going to do? They're going to actually flip it to him or are they going to just continue to send him out? I mean, with Barry and Brown's speed, there's a lot of different things you can do, and I liked those plays. I also liked how Tyree Adams was playing mean, he was really looking like a phenomenal left tackle piece for you in this one, at least in the couple plays that I was noticing. I put Tyree Adams as a monster. I mean, he was really holding down his side pretty well for the most part. But I don't know. It's just one of those things of, man, offensively, they just could never string together enough things consistently that made me feel like there was even a glimmer of hope that this offense was going to find a rhythm in this game. And really, Nuss was probably the biggest disappointment for me. And, you know, that's the thing. I kept watching Nuss go throughout this second half, almost trying to prove that he knows how to throw the football when we know he knows how to throw the football. And I mean, there was a couple times like there was a play where he threw it to the end zone to Chris Hilton, and Hilton was covered up. But it looked like he had Aaron Anderson open, definitely not anywhere close to like the end zone. But Aaron Anderson looked like he was open. I'd have to go back and watch it again to make sure. But it's like instead of taking that throw to Aaron, you're trying to chuck it down the field to Chris Hilton. And it's like, bro, what are you doing? And there were several throws, even some throws that he made that I was like, don't do that. Like it's just one of those things of the things that I was hoping that Nuss would have really improved upon up to this point, the things that against Clemson it looked like he had kind of fixed for the most part. It almost seemed like he really just took a big step backwards in this game against Tech. I mean, he was just throwing really bad throws from time to time. Again, even once he completed, did not look great sometimes. And it just to me is extremely frustrating because, man, that Joe Burrow year one to year two leap, that Jaden Daniels year one to year two leap, were both of those guys. And let's throw the Heisman part out of it. I mean, yes, they both got Heisman's in year two, being at LSU, which was awesome. But just from their leadership growth, and just from the fact that you could trust them to go out there and make the smart decisions and make the plays that were going to help the team and not hurt the team. I mean, that's what truly made those two spectacular in those jumps from year one to year two. It wasn't the Heisman, in the stats. I mean, those were awesome. And don't get me wrong, like, you're always going to take Heisman seasons from your quarterbacks like that. But I mean, it was just the maturity and growth in their leadership that really stood out from year one to year two with both of those guys. And man, for Nussmeier, you're wearing number 18, which is the number that they give to somebody they trust the most as a leader. They're not always the most athletically gifted. They're not always even the best player necessarily on the team. Richard Dixon talked about that a lot on 104.5 Baton Rouge after Nuss was selected. They were asking him about it, and he was saying, 18 doesn't always go to necessarily the best guy on the team, but it goes to the leader. It goes to the person that is trusted the most and has shown they have the leadership qualities to be one of the top dogs, if not the top dog on the team. And if that's you, if you're Garrett Nussmeier, I know that's some lofty expectations to put you in a crowd of leaders like that, but not only that, you're going from a year one to year two leap where they're obviously going to compare you to Joe and to Jaden, which again is lofty, but those are the expectations. You are a veteran quarterback now. You cannot be having games like this where you're just going out there and throwing whatever you want, thinking, oh, it's just Louisiana Tech. I should be able to get anything. No, you still got to go out there and do the little things. Just like you want an offensive identity that's going to be there from week to week to week, your leadership qualities need to be reflected in the same path week to week to week. You're taking check downs and quick throws that were going to lead to good plays for your offense last week. Do that against Tech too. Don't just save that for top 10 matchups against teams. Do it in each and every single game because that's what the team needs you to do that. You cannot continue to grow and build if you're not doing the little things right. And there were so many times he had checkdowns and he just wouldn't take them. He had easy throws and he just wouldn't take them. And look, there was also times, let's be completely honest. Yes, I know he's not the most athletically gifted mobile quarterback out there. He's barely even mobile as it is, but he can run enough to be effective. And when Louisiana Tech was dropping a ton of people back into coverage, He had several opportunities where he could have just tucked the ball and ran forward for 7 or 8 yards. Like, why are you still not doing that at this point? That is something they literally have talked about all offseason as something they have been working on with Nuss. And he just didn't do it against Tech. Maybe he was trying to save some of it for Florida. I don't know. But that's the thing. From week to week, especially as a leader, especially as somebody wearing number 18 and the first quarterback to wear number 18 since Matt Mock in '03, another championship quarterback, I expect you to be able to do the little things right from week to week. And that's just something that he has got to get better at. And look, I mean, that's really the whole theme of this game, too, is just sloppiness, looking tired. I mean, and look, eventually the defense, I mean, did give up a touchdown, but that was when mostly backups were in towards the end of the game. So you can't really blame them for throwing nearly a flawless game when your offense just can't go out there and really do much of anything. So it's just a really bad, poor executed game for LSU in this one. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's what it was. Very poorly executed game for LSU. And look, in my immediate response, I viewed this game as just a complete disaster. But to be honest, looking at it now again, I'm happy that we at least pulled out the win, especially in a game where you had a really lackluster offense. You had big injuries to Braylon Moore and Trades Green. I didn't mention that one in the second half, but Trades Green does go down. And luckily, it's not a season ending knee injury like what a lot of people thought it was going to be, but he is going to have to miss some time. And so that's the thing. Now you got some big injuries. You got a big game on the horizon. I know Florida just lost to South Florida and they dropped out of the rankings, but that's still a game you cannot sleep on. And man, you're going to have your leaders step up in this one because you're coming. And honestly, a lot of people say, man, Florida's going to have a fire lit under them. LSU better roll into Florida with a fire lit under them too, because this was a poor effort offensively for them today. Nussmeier and the squad better mean absolute business next week when they show up for the Florida game. Now, we can talk about that as we get closer to that, of course, but just, I mean, this was just not great. But the defense, though, was the shining star because they continue to prove that they are one of the best units, if not, well, I wouldn't quite yet put them as the best defense in the country. I don't want to be that bold, but they are one of the top units in the country for sure. They have turned this thing around dramatically, and they proved that again today. They really laid the hammer down on Tech. Again, not even giving up that touchdown until late with backups in. So really, really good performance from them, and at least you can kind of carry that. But you've got a lot of things to fix offensively going into Florida. And here's the thing, you're going to have to make a game plan for that O line. Because even if Braylon Moore plays, I doubt he's going to be 100%. You're going to have to come up with a scheme where you can protect them a lot, whether it's Chester starting at center or Moore starting at center. You got to come up with something. And look, honestly, Brian Kelly, you've got to also fix some other things too from this because honestly, you have had a ton of problems with these quote unquote lesser opponents throughout your tenure. You just have. Like, he has struggled to get this team really motivated to play these teams like Nichols and tonight, or sorry, the other night against Louisiana Tech, struggled to get them to go out and play to the level that they're expected to play at. But that's the thing. You understand as a fan sometimes why they're not so motivated to do that. But as a coach, you should be livid that they're going out there and playing so poorly against Louisiana Tech. You just should. I mean, that's embarrassing for you to go out there and to perform like that. And so, I mean, it's just one of those deals of Brian Kelly, you've got to fix this because there's no excuse for it. You can win every big game in the book, but man, if you drop one of these smaller games, I mean, it could potentially ruin your season. And so you've got to make sure this team is ready and bringing the energy to every performance, not just the big ones. Again, you should be happy you got out with the win because there are a lot of teams across the country that had a lot worse weekends than you this past weekend. But still, this is a big issue in my mind. That's one of the few red flags from this that I'm really taking is that this just continues to kind of be a thing with Brian Kelly. But I don't know. You did survive the hangover game, and I guess that's kind of the biggest thing. But the last note that I have here, and in the heat of the moment, this was a little bit more intense, but I do think just moving forward with the offensive staff, there are just a few things to just keep your eye on more than anything. It's not that I'm saying these guys should be fired or anything, but just like Joe Sloan, definitely you need to kind of keep tabs on him just because he really does need to prove, I think, that he can come up with good offensive game plans that will carry over from week to week. Because it seems like he has really kind of struggled with that throughout the last year. You almost kind of gave him a pass because it was his first year really calling plays. But, we're into year two, and you saw the really good stuff that he did against Clemson last week. And it's like, well, then why can't you come up with something better again against Louisiana Tech? And hopefully he comes up with a great plan against Florida, where they can win again. But, that's just the thing. I don't know if I can trust Joe Sloan entirely week to week to do that. And so if you're Brian Kelly, I think at some point you got to sit down and really think like, at what point do I look at this staff and go, okay, maybe I need to go get a veteran play caller? Do I need to go get a veteran, guy to start coming in here and coming up with offensive schemes? Because I don't know, Joe Sloan is really cut out to do that for the long haul. I don't know. Now, I'm also not a coach, so there may be somebody else that can speak into this more than me and say, you're being dumb. Like, Sloan's doing a fine job. It's just the players aren't executing or something. And I could be wrong, but to me, it just seems like Sloan has got so much talent, but he's not finding great ways to use them all the time. And every now and again, he'll pull out a play call that looks excellent. But there's just a lot more times where it seems like we have no idea what we're doing out there. And that's just a little bit concerning. So, not that I'm saying Sloan needs to be fired by any means, or that even like Joe Sloan needs to be let go tomorrow, especially. But I do think Brian Kelly's got to kind of have to keep an eye on him. And because it's not just leading to Sloan being questioned by fans, where fans are already calling for his job, but also there's a lot of people calling out Brad Davis too. And here's the thing, I think Brad Davis, is obviously an excellent recruiter. He's a phenomenal recruiter for offensive line, but I don't think he's necessarily doing a bad job, with the offensive line as a whole, because obviously you just had, I mean, Will Campbell go in the top five picks of the past NFL draft. You had four offensive linemen last year drafted. Like, obviously, these guys are pretty good that he's developing. Like, they're going to the NFL, but it just seems like, people are questioning him a lot because it's not looking great for them on the field. And again, is that offensive play calling or is it a Brad Davis thing? Like, I just think you got to really evaluate Joe Sloan because then it's like, well, then what do you do? If is it a Brad Davis issue? Now you got all these questions of things, because I don't think anybody's questioning Cortez Hankton at this point. I mean, nobody's questioning Frank Wilson. That's for sure. But now people are starting to question Brad Davis too, and it's like, okay, well now we're starting to see what fans are really starting to notice about this offense, that the offensive line has been struggling and that the play calling has been kind of suspect. So I think for Brian Kelly, you got to sit back and adjust. And again, I'm not saying that anybody's got to be fired, and I'm definitely not suggesting that they fire Brad Davis by any means. Don't get that misconstrued. Like, I think Brad Davis is a really good coach and a really solid recruiter, obviously. And it would be a huge loss, I think, if he wasn't on this staff. But again, you got to think about all the pieces falling together. And so if you're Brian Kelly, you got to keep a close eye on this staff moving forward. But that'll be the last little note I put on this just very, very tough game. We'll get to players of the game. So offensively, got Barry and Brown. I mean, the dude had like 151 all-purpose yards. Just a phenomenal game for Barry, and where he also had he had 8 catches for 94 yards, one carry for 15 yards, and a kickoff return for 42. Again, making up 151 total yards. Awesome performance by Barry and Brown in this one. But then for defense, honestly, I just put the whole squad mostly as a joke, but for real, that whole defense really stepped up. There wasn't really a performance to me that really stood out amongst the others. I mean, Patrick Payton definitely had himself one heck of a day, but really, I mean, there wasn't like a Mansour Delane moment where you were like, that dude is really balling out in this one. They all played really well. So I just put the whole defense because without them, this game would have been a lot worse than what it was. But anyways, a Tigers sloppy win. You're 2-0. Now you move on to Florida. But there was a lot of other crazy stuff that happened in week two. So we're going to go ahead and move into reaction time now for everything crazy that went on in week two of college football. Tiger fans, we know you bleed purple and gold. And if you're looking for the gear that shows it off in style, you've got to check out Bengals and Bandits. This isn't your average team shop. Bengals and Bandits is locally owned and packed with unique LSU inspired apparel, hats, and accessories you won't find anywhere else. Whether you're headed to Death Valley on Saturday night, tailgating with friends, or just repping your Tigers around town, they've got you covered. Every piece is designed with that Louisiana flair we all love. Bold, stylish, and perfect for showing your Tiger pride year round. So next time you're in Baton Rouge, swing by Bengals and Bandits or check them out online to grab your new favorite game day fit. That's Bengals and Bandits, where Tiger fans shop to stand out from the crowd. So, when reacting to everything that happened in week two in college football, I got to start with admitting I know I was fully wrong about Oregon. I did pick Oregon to win the game, but I did say as well with that game that I didn't really believe that a 27.5 point spread was really going to hold up. I didn't think that was going to happen. I thought Mike Gundy would make that game a lot more interesting and kind of put some pressure on Oregon to go out there and pull a big one out, but I mean, to Oregon's credit, they not only got that 27.5 point spread, they just absolutely destroyed Oklahoma State. 69-3 as the final score. And man, I mean, Dante Moore had an absolute masterclass of a day, 266 yards through the air with 3 touchdowns. I mean, that was just phenomenal. And then I know for LSU fans, you're going to hate this, but DeCorian Moore also had a 65-yard touchdown, I believe, at this one. That was just absolutely wild. DeCorian Moore proved he's a pretty good player, and so obviously we hate that he's not an LSU uniform, but he made some big plays for Oregon on Saturday against Oklahoma State. But yeah, I mean, golly, that Oregon pick was correct, but my spread pick was not. That absolutely went down the drain. But wow, oh wow, was I wrong about that one? I can admit that fully. I can admit when I'm wrong. But another thing I was wrong about, which was actually an awesome thing to be wrong about, was I also did not believe Mississippi State was going to pull off the win against Arizona State. And man, just what an awesome win for Mississippi State. I mean, truly, I am so happy that Mississippi State got that win on Saturday night. I mean, from being a 2-10 team last year and just absolutely falling flat on your face to now being able to say, we at home were able to take down the number 12 team in the country, a team that had just played in the college football playoff the year before, brought back a lot of those pieces, including their quarterback who returned for another year. Like, man, I mean, that's an awesome, awesome win for Mississippi State. And I really am truly happy for them. I like when teams like Mississippi State can be competitive and have big games like this because it just makes college football a lot more interesting and a lot more fun. So I'm really happy that Mississippi State pulled out that win on Saturday night, but I doubted them. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I did doubt them going into it, and I won't lie. I even doubted it kind of in the middle of the game. They were up big. Arizona State came back, tied it up, and then eventually got that field goal lead, and I was like, man, the Bulldogs did just about everything they could, but they're just going to end up falling short. And then, man, when they got that huge touchdown and then the pick to seal it. I mean, I was ecstatic for them. I really and truly was. So, congrats, Mississippi State. You pulled out a big one on Saturday against Arizona State. And I, along with the rest of the college football world, can say, man, that was an awesome upset. Thank you for doing that. But also, just personally, I'm glad that you got that win because I really hope that's a turning point here now, and you guys can have a much brighter future ahead with Jeff Lebby and company. So that's a really exciting win for them, and potentially one that can really kind of spark a fire for that program moving forward. So I'm really, really glad for them, like I said. And then other games that we kept our eye on, I mean, Ole Miss and Kentucky. This was a 30-23 game, and this was another one where I saw that 8.5 point spread for Ole Miss, and I was like, you know, I could see this going either one of two ways. Either this is a really close ball game and it really comes down to the wire, or Ole Miss just absolutely beats them senseless. I mean, could have seen both outcomes happening. And this one ended up being a pretty tight ball game. And look, this was something that I'd kind of mentioned a little bit, but I'll say it again. Ole Miss is a team that had a lot of hype coming into the year because, Lane Kiffin's an excellent coach. A lot of people were hyping up Austin Simmons and this offense. And I will say this, Ole Miss's weapons are still pretty good. I can't admit that. I didn't know a whole lot about their weapons going into the year. Had a lot of questions about that. They got some pretty good weapons. But when it comes to Austin Simmons, I'll say this. I'm not really a big believer in Austin Simmons right now, at least this year. I think, does he have some potential moving forward? Sure, but I mean, you've thrown two picks in your first two games as the starter now. I mean, there's just some signs of some things that, okay, I get it. You're really early on into your starting career here. You definitely have time to settle in and lock in and get better as the year goes on. And not only that, I mean, potentially for the future, get a lot better. But I don't know, there's just something that was off about him in that game, and those mistakes he made just were really, really bad. I mean, it wasn't like it was like what happened to Nuss, where, a ball got tipped up and tipped around. He just threw some really bad interceptions. And so decision making's kind of a problem. And I think if they're going to be reliant upon Austin Simmons the whole year, I don't know if you can really bank on Ole Miss being a team that's really competitive in the SEC in college football this year. And I could be wrong. But I think this game kind of proved, okay, look, even against a pretty bad Kentucky team on Saturday, I mean, those two picks led to some points for Kentucky that really helped them to not only lead early on, but to hang around a lot longer than they really should have. So, yeah, Ole Miss has got some good talent, offensively and things like that, but I just don't really trust the quarterback, and I feel like that defense is still just really trying to find its rhythm after replacing a good bit of talent on that side of the ball too. So as much as Ole Miss could improve for sure this year, and they could be really great next year, this year I'm just not really sold on it. And I think that Kentucky game, at least for right now, solidified that for me. But that was a close one in Lexington. 30-23 is the final score there. And then of course South Florida and Florida, man. This is one that I said I did not love that spread for Florida, that 17.5 point spread. I mean, I thought Florida would win for sure, but I did not expect it to be a blowout like the spread suggested. I thought South Florida would kind of keep it close, maybe within a touchdown. Well, South Florida definitely did that. They kept it close, but they also ended up winning the thing. And man, I think the biggest storyline that come from that game though is not just that South Florida won, but the way that Florida lost, because Billy Napier did a really bad job kind of piecing the end of that game together. He made some really bad coaching decisions. And honestly, he was kind of the reason why they lost that game. Now you still your players have to go out there and play better than the players on the other team for sure, but just the way Napier handled those last few minutes of that game were really, really bad. And man, if they can't turn it around, Billy Napier could find himself without a job at the end of the year. And I know we've been saying that for like the last 3 years. Now it seems like with Florida. But man, after hyping up Lagway all off season and doing all these things, to see Lagway kind of struggle a little bit against USF, and to be honest, I don't even remember if he had a great game against. their first opponent either. I'll go back and look it up real fast, but I don't remember it being a great game for him. Let's see. He had, 120 yards, three touchdowns, and three carries for 3 yards. Eh, not a great game. He had a QBR of 29 and a half, which isn't an awesome stat to boast about, but against South Florida, he struggled. And so it's really one of those things of, man, for Florida for the rest of the year, can you really trust them? They've already dropped out of the top 25 now. Is it going to get worse? Or can they somehow pull off a few upsets on this really, really tough schedule they've got this year? I don't know. But Florida, man, they really dropped the ball on Saturday, and that was just an ugly, ugly game. But then the last game that we were really kind of keeping our eye on for the weekend was Oklahoma and Michigan. And look, 24-13 as a final score, makes it kind of seem like it was a little bit tighter than it actually was. But really, Oklahoma, just kind of was always right out of reach. It felt like they got a 14-0 lead, going into the second half. Then Justice Haynes gets a 75-yard touchdown run early into the third quarter, which makes it 14-7. You think, okay, kind of got a ball game here, but then Oklahoma scores another touchdown, goes up 21-7. Michigan 21-10 with a field goal. They get another field goal, 21-13. But then Oklahoma goes down, gets a field goal of their own, and pushes it to 24-13. So again, this was just a game where Oklahoma just kind of always kept it right out of reach. And look, Bryce Underwood, not a great game for him at all, which I know for LSU fans probably makes a lot of us really, really happy. 9 of 24 for 142 yards. Very, very pathetic on that end. Justice Haynes had 125 yards and a touchdown, which was pretty nice. But the thing is Oklahoma just had the better playmakers. John Mateer gets 270 yards on 21 of 34 passing. That's really good. And a touchdown and a pick. A pick is never great, but you were able to survive it, obviously. And then Mateer also added 74 yards on the ground on 19 carries with two touchdowns, which is another part of this is just, man, Mateer is looking like he's got some potential. That's the thing. I don't want to necessarily base it all off of this one game against Michigan, but if Mateer can keep doing stuff like this, he could be a legitimate threat. And I know that this was another team that I was very questionable on. And look, they got a receiver in Burks that stepped up big too that I did not expect. He had 7 catches for 101 and a touchdown. Really great day for him. Oklahoma as a whole, I knew defensively would be kind of tough because Venables is always pretty good at coaching the defense. Just wasn't sure if Mateer was really going to be that guy. Well, Mateer has looked pretty solid throughout these first couple weeks, and can he continue to build and grow on that? That's what I'm going to be interested in keeping my eye on because, again, if he can't and he starts falling a little bit short too, then Oklahoma, I think, is really not going to be able to do much of anything moving forward here. But if Mateer can continue to build on this and continue to get better and better, they could be an interesting team for the remainder of the year. But again, it's just one of those weird things of like, was Michigan just not great? I don't know. Again, it feels like from week to week we're learning a lot of different things about teams. So good win for Oklahoma though, nonetheless. Michigan came in as the number 15 team. You were 18. You got the win. That's a good win. That's a really solid win. I'm just saying I want to see what they can continue to do moving forward because again, it didn't feel like they just I mean dominated as much as kept them out of reach the whole time. This was kind of one of those games where you're just trying to see who could actually score, and the fact that Oklahoma was able to put up 3 touchdowns meant they could separate themselves and score. So yeah, so that was just an interesting one, and I'm going to be interested to keep my eye on Oklahoma again, a team that I was not very high on at the beginning of the year, but one that I think could now definitely get interesting as the year rolls on. But those were all of the big things from week 2, man. And look, This ended up being a pretty solid week of college football, despite not a whole lot of marquee matchups. And so, really looking forward to next week, though. We got some big games that will be coming up in week 3, and we'll talk about that later. You can expect later this week for a preview episode to drop for the Florida Gators, as well as my picks for the other big games that are going on in week 3 of college football. So make sure to tune into that wherever you get your podcast from or on YouTube if you follow us on there. And I hope you guys will please like, share, subscribe, wherever you get your podcast from. That would really help us out a lot over here. But until next time, hey, hope you guys have a great rest of your day and go Tigers.